Justice and Peace. Public viewing for George Floyd. His death sparking national and international protest. His family's final words to their loved one.
Tell you what, if he was told he would have to sacrifice his life to bring the world together, and I knowing him, by knowing he would have did it.
Plus, bail has been raised for the former officer accused of second-degree murder in Floyd's death. The neck restraint maneuver used by Eric Chauvin now faces scrutiny.
So good, man.
Also, newly released video shows New Jersey trooper fatally shooting an unarmed black man during a routine traffic stop during Memorial Day weekend. Justice and Peace bringing you inside the movement for police reform. It's Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian Buckmire, your host here at Justice and Peace. Now, as we said, we're starting off on a bit of a somber note. Yesterday in Houston, there was a memorial for George Floyd, but also some family members from Ahmaud Arbery, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, and Michael Brown. So first, we want to start off by remembering those that were killed not only in police confrontations, but also in the protests. Because remember, a lot of people who have been killed subsequently in the protest of George Floyd, including people like former officer or retired officer David Dorn. Let's begin with the memorial that we saw yesterday.
And I mean, he gives the best advice on anything. I mean, he's very understanding in life. And I tell you what, if he was told he would have to sacrifice his life to bring the world together, and I knowing him, by knowing he would have did it.
Wow.
And I mean, I love this love, and we all hurting as a family.
They have doubled back and claimed another life by a chokehold. That's why we have to fight for justice.
Yes, ma'am.
This family is hurting now, just like I'm hurting. My hurt don't go away. So that's why I know what they are feeling. And just like you're out here today, don't go home and don't do anything. Yep. You're paying your respects, but the most respect you can pay is to help this family.
That's right.
Come out, even after the cameras. The camera's going to be gone in a few days. The lights are going out. But like when my son was killed 6 years ago, even when the lights went out, I was still fighting. This is what I tell this family. Don't stop fighting. Because that's what they look for you to do, is to stop fighting.
I'm the father of Ahmaud Arbery, son that was lynched February 23rd, 2020. I just had to come and support the Floyd family because I feel what they're going through, because I lost a loved one. Because my son was lynched by 2 white men. So I'm just letting y'all know the fight got to keep going on.
Amen.
We can't stop. We got to stick together because these folks ain't supposed to lose their lives. They're supposed to still be here today.
Yeah.
They didn't break no laws, ain't break no crime, but crime was not a murder. And they lost their lives. They lost their life from the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. And that's unjustified.
Amen.
So we got to do better.
You know, and for me to be here today and meet with the family and know that I feel your pain, I know your pain, I still feel your pain. I still got 2014 running through my veins with pain. I'm here for y'all, man. I'm always be here. I'm a phone call away. Make sure y'all call me. Let me know if you need me. And I'll be there, brother. I love y'all. Love the family.
Too,
So there are multiple families grieving together, but also speaking together about the need to continue past just the cameras, past all the media, because eventually the protests are going to end. Eventually we'll get back to our day-to-day lives. But the question will become, will there be lasting change, or will we just see this happen again and again and again? I'm joined today with New York City Public Defender Anna Carlsen, a good friend and colleague as well. Anna, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for coming in.
Good afternoon, Brian. It's always great to appear on the Law&Crime Network. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Anna, kind of talk to us about this, because your job, or our job, sorry, doesn't just stop with these protests. It's kind of an ongoing fight to push for justice incrementally, or sometimes in large jumps like we're doing now. So What are some of your points about the memorial honoring those that have lost their lives to this just senseless death like happened in George Floyd, but also the idea that it doesn't just stop 2 weeks after the protest or 2 weeks after his death, it has to continue in some way, shape, or form?
So I think a big motivator behind the protesting that's happened so far has been almost a wake, almost an emotional outpouring, a mourning by the nation of people killed by police officers, Black people and people of color killed in police violence. And I think the memorial service and the funeral today are going to serve as almost a turning point where this really becomes a political conversation. Up until this point, I think politicians have taken a step back, have really not weighed in with any sort of force. But I expect that following the memorial and the funeral, we're going to see public statements by leaders at all levels, not just the local level, but at the national level. I noticed that the Republican governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, was present at the memorial service. He walked through, he made an incredibly powerful statement against Chauvin, really decrying the police violence against George Floyd and saying in stronger terms than I would have expected from any Republican governor that he denounced the actions taken by the Minneapolis Police Department. So
yeah, this would definitely be a message that should transcend age, gender, political views, religious views. Keeping people, citizens, safe in their own communities should not be something that should be divided in the ballot box, but should rather be unified in the hearts and minds of people. Let's switch gears a little from the memorial as to what happened with Officer Chauvin. Now, we learned yesterday that his bail amount increased drastically. Now, there's two options that we're reading now. That it moved up to $1.25 million if there are no conditions, but it's a $1 million bond if there are conditions. Those conditions being surrender of his firearm, no contact with the Floyd family. He's not allowed to leave the state, and also he's not allowed to work as a security guard or a law enforcement officer. Those are some of the conditions, and that's why the bail was raised. Let's look at another angle from the death of George Floyd to see why this bail was raised. Of course, I got to let you know it's graphic, but this is why we're here.
Mom, I love you. Please, I love you. My kid, I love you. My son is listening. I can't breathe this, man. It's so good, man. Mom, I love you. I can't do nothing. My face is gone. I can't breathe, man. Please. Please let me stand. Please, man, I can't breathe.
All right, so Anna, as public defenders, day in, day out, we're saying no bail for our clients. Don't set the bail. I'm not going to argue that bail should be more or higher. I think that'd be hypocritical of my position. But can you talk about what this means for the prosecutors in terms of prosecuting this case when they have the bail that high? What are they signaling to the community? What are they signaling to the defense? What are they signaling to police departments when the bail is this high?
Well, it's interesting. I actually don't think this is a very high bail. I think although the number 1 million and 1.25 million with conditions sounds like a big number, when you're paying a bail, you're really only posting a percentage if you're going through a bondsman, if you're putting together a bond package. So while the layman may hear 1 million and think there's no way a Minneapolis police officer is going to have $1 million in the bank, I think it's likely that he'd only need to come up with a percentage of that, 10, 15, 20% of that up front, and he could use collateral such as a home that he owns to post that bail. So I don't think it's I think that this is a bail amount that this officer is most likely going to make. I don't see him staying in. I think this was a very easy ask by the prosecutor to ask for a number that sounds stunning, but I expect that he will make it. As a criminal defense attorney, I've seen clients make bail amounts that I thought were really startling, but all you need is for community members to come together, people with smaller increments to pool those together, to show that you have assets. And I think it's not unreasonable that the community supporting Derek Chauvin might have assets to put together to pay this bail. I think There's probably a community of police officers who are going to support him, and possibly other members of the public who are going to come together to make this bail. I think he's not going to pay it immediately. If I were his attorney, I would be advising him to remain in for a little bit longer, wait for the spotlight to shift away, and then post the bail. It sounds like a high amount, but again, the ultimate takeaway is I think this is not a high bail.
Yeah. So if it's not a high bail, then my assumption then, Anna, and I agree with you because it's percentage, the community can come together and raise money for him. I would imagine that maybe means that the prosecutors maybe not signaling that they're going as strong as they might in other cases, because of course the other option is to remand or not allow for any bail for any amount to have that person released. We're going to continue with this and a breaking story that we have out of New Jersey after this break. All right, so next we have a video that was just released literally hours ago, but we've been hearing about it out of New Jersey, and that's the death of Maurice Gordon, an unarmed black man who was shot and killed during a routine traffic stop. We're going to start off with a video, and then we'll give it a little bit more explanation, but this is something that I think has baffled a lot of us, and we're all asking for questions. Let's take a look.
Yeah. You want a mask like this to wear? Yes? Yeah. You want a mask? Did you have one in your car or not? I'm going to put them in the bugs out of here. Get in the car now. Get in the car. Hold on, give me another unit now. Get out of the car. Get the fuck out of the car. Get out of the car now. Get the fuck out. Get out of the car. Get out of the fucking car now. Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. Hold on, get me another unit. Hold on, get me another unit. Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. Shot fired! Shot fired! Shot fired!
All right, so that's just a bit of the clip, but let me give a little bit more context. Earlier that morning, we're getting reports that a call came in for Mr. Gordon from a friend saying that he was what we call an EDP, or an emotionally distressed person, that he was exhibiting signs that his friend was concerned about on a welfare call. Fast forward, you have this just ordinary stop. By all accounts, it's supposed to be for speeding. And in the video, actually, prior to the video we just saw, you can see the officer. And I'm a public defender, jaded as maybe any one of them, if not more. But the officer seems to be a complete gentleman, helping him out of the car, walking him down. You can see him stumble. There's no word as to whether or not he's intoxicated, but he does look like something's off, like he's suffering from a mental health episode. He's placed in the car, and by all accounts, he's free to leave. He's not being detained. He's not arrested. There's no handcuffs. You're not detained for a speeding ticket. His car is stopped and not able to move. So the officer says, hey, if you want, you can stay in my car and we'll wait together for the tow truck. Again, a gentleman and an officer. But then the weirdest thing happens that when he voluntarily wants to leave the car, he's accosted by the officer, and it literally goes from 0 to 100 and he's shot and killed. And now we're all asking, how? What? 20 days after the incident, we're getting this video for the first time. More questions than answers. Anna Carlsen, talk to us about this incident, of how this escalated, in my eyes, beyond belief.
So as a public defender, what I think happened here is this is an individual. You can see in the beginning of this video, the part that we weren't able to see in this clip, that this person really appears dazed. He really appears confused about the arrest. Something is clearly off. And the officer is doing his best to interact with him, as you said, as a gentleman. But I don't think this person is trained in how to interact with somebody who may be suffering from a mental health crisis. And he's alone. And I think this is an instance where maybe implicit biases that this officer had, or just fear of this person, have really motivated actions that were totally unreasonable, totally escalated beyond what was required. The officer, I expect, is going to try to use a self-defense claim. I know that Officer Wetzel made a statement to responding officers that Maurice Gordon had tried to go for his gun. If you have ever seen the movie Chicago, there's a great song and dance number about both people reaching for the gun. That's going to be his defense here. We both reached for the gun. I got it first, and I shot him to defend myself against deadly force. But I think this interaction could have been avoided just from what you see on the video. In 17 different places, he could have cuffed this individual for his own safety, even if he wasn't under arrest at a routine traffic stop. If he was concerned about him leaving the car, he could have handcuffed him and placed him back in the car for his own safety. They could have avoided all of this. And I think they're talking about putting this case into a grand jury as soon as grand juries are sitting in New Jersey. And I everything that you are able to see achieve an indictment.
It's going to be interesting to see, because if that narrative of Gordon reaching for his gun persists, and I forgot to add that prior to Gordon being placed in the vehicle, it appears that you can hear him consenting to a pat down. And so the officer knows that he's not armed. He's kind of listing off, okay, this is your wallet, this is your cell phone, I have your ID. So he's unarmed. And so the only defense, I think you hit the nail on the head, is that he's reaching for my gun. Which is always interesting, because it's very difficult to take out an officer's gun. There's a latch on it. If it's the same thing as a peace officer's in New York, the gun doesn't come directly out. You actually have to maneuver it in a manner for it to come out. So it's always peculiar how that argument is used when it's not really articulated how that has to happen for the gun to actually come out of the holster. But we'll save that for the grand jury. We'll save that for another time. I want to switch gears now to the response that some citizens are having to the protests. Not the looting, not the rioting, not the protesting, but the crimes that people are committing against other people protesting. Here, we have an instance where an individual drives his car into a large group and causes a lot of damage. Let's take a look.
36-year-old Harry Rogers was arrested and charged with attempted malicious wounding, assault and battery, and destruction of property. According to police, Rogers, who is from Hanover County, was seen by witnesses revving up his pickup truck's engine and driving through protesters. Witnesses also say they saw Rogers with a handgun. Now, the Commonwealth's attorney's office this morning said that Rogers was seen driving recklessly on a median where protesters were walking before hitting a protester on a bike. Rogers is being held without bond at this time. And the Commonwealth's attorney's office here in Henrico made note this morning that the reason for them wanting him to be held without bond was due to several reasons, including statements made by Rogers about him saying he was the president of the KKK here in Virginia and the highest ranking member to not be incarcerated.
So held without bond, I think that's very interesting, because here you have an individual who's driving up the side of a median and striking at least one individual and causing property damage. And then on top of that, he's saying, hey, I'm the head of the KKK in Virginia. Now, before we get into this specific case, Anna, let's talk about this case where the person doesn't kill anyone and they're held without bond. However, Chauvin has bail set and he can get out. How does that make sense? How do you kind of square that away?
I think you're seeing the difference between the treatment a police officer receives and the treatment a civilian receives. But again, I think the reasons here that they're holding him without bonds are probably to do with the kind of network and community support that I talked about earlier for Chauvin. If he's the highest ranking member of the KKK, sadly, the KKK is very much alive and well in Virginia. He probably has backing. He probably has support. I think the court and the prosecutor are considering the fact that if any bond amount is set, there may be donations. He may be able to leave, and he may have a network that may hide him. He doesn't have a law-abiding network of police officers supporting him. He has a criminal network who could try to take him out of the jurisdiction or hide him elsewhere.
Yeah, so but it becomes interesting, but as we're seeing attacks on protesters, I mean, this isn't the first time. In past protests, and even within this protest in different cities, we're seeing individuals use their vehicle as a weapon against other people, and then somehow make the argument of, well, you're on the street. I don't see that argument flying. Maybe it's because I'm a New Yorker, and if we are New Yorkers, sorry, Anna, and if we took that argument, half of New York City, half of Manhattan would be dead. So I don't see that playing out well. Do you see an argument for that kind of case?
Say that again. An argument for wounding with a car?
They're on the street. So I think he's trying to argue they were on the street and I tried to accelerate on the median, but he ends up hitting someone anyways. I don't see that as a defense.
No, I think the reason that they haven't yet charged him with hate crimes but are considering it is I would expect that there's a background investigation going on and that there was probably some kind of communication happening before the incident. I would guess that the Virginia prosecutors believe that they can find some kind of chatter, Facebook messages, text messages, calls, communications, plotting this action out, that it really was not spur of the moment. That's what I'm expecting.
I would say the same thing as well. Anna Carlsen, thank you very much. We have Vincent Velasquez coming up next for Keeping the Peace. Vincent, how you doing? What you got for us coming up?
I'm good, Brian. We're going to be bringing this conversation forward, just picking up where you left off. We're still going to talk about criminal justice reform and some initiatives that are new to the table that even President Obama mentioned.
All right, thank you very much, Vincent. That is Justice and Peace here with you. I'm Brian Buckmire. I want to give my condolences to the George Floyd family and all those who are mourning on either side of the aisle, whether you were died in police custody or you're a victim of the looting and rioting and shooting. Up next, Keeping the Peace with Vincent Velasquez.